VP Ops candidates tonight. We are going to begin with 3 questions. Each team submitted a question to be asked of all 3 teams. So we will begin with those questions. I'll be calling on the teams by their team acronym. So we have GPP, JDL in the middle, and RMS at the end. So first question reads. Yes. Yes, as long as it's under 3 minutes. Also, every team now has 1 rebuttal per question, so it should foster a lot more back and forth with the questions. So the first question reads, and this was submitted by one of the teams. Has any team revised their platform since posting it? And if so, how? Beginning with GPP.
We have not revised our platform at all since posting. We edited 1 word. We actually wrote residence instead of residence. And we made 1 other spelling mistake, and that's all we changed. We have changed nothing else.
I'll actually add a little bit something. To be completely honest, I did change another thing. I wrote down the IRS, and it was the Canada Revenue Agency, and residence, and we did update the table of contents because it was shifted quite a bit in the very entrance, so we fixed some of the links there.
JDL.
Great question. Oh, dear. Great question. No, we haven't changed our platform, the document that is posted. We have, in being at booths often and speaking with students about our platform, saying, what do you like, what don't you like, what are your questions, what are your concerns? We identified a number of recurring things that people are interested in, so we decided to do something a bit different, and we developed fact sheets on some issues that were really, students were really excited about to help enhance the information that was provided. We didn't want our platform to be 100 pages long, and so we added the fact sheets on our website as a supplement of information to some of those topics.
Hello, is this on? Yes, it is. Okay. Okay, so we haven't changed our platform all that much. We've changed. We misspelt Principal Wolf at the beginning. I'm being honest. And we also changed 1 point on our peer support center where we said the merits of the current AMS team. 1 person came forward from the peer support center and said that their marketing initiatives, they've done a lot themselves. However, the AMS has done a lot to support them through their website. So we adjusted that to reflect, a wider diversity of perspectives and getting better information. The final thing was under our platform point 3, increasing constitutional review. I had the example of originally that the academic caucus didn't meet, and then I got that from a meeting I had with the current AMS president, and then someone who's on that caucus said they did meet, so I took it out until it's proven to be positive. That's all we've changed.
Okay, the next question, again from one of the teams, is each team mentions declining academic quality as a major issue facing the incoming executive. Although many of these decisions are made outside the scope of the AMS by the university administration. If elected, how do you plan to protect the academic quality at Queen's University? Starting with JDL.
Thank you very much. So I think that, first of all, it's important to note that academic quality means different things to different people. Quality really touches on everything ranging from the kind of facilities that you have available, the classrooms you have, the technology that is in those classrooms, the quality of instructors that you have, the resources that you have available to provide a broader learning environment at your university. And some of those resources include the library, the writing center, the learning commons, all of the things like that. So quality is really a large scope topic, I would say. So in terms of what's in our platform and what we believe in quite strongly, looking at the resources that are available to students and then also advocating on a number of policy priorities. In terms of looking at resources, we really envision the libraries being the hub of academic learning on Queen's campus. And something that's in our platform quite prominently is enhancing library resources. So students have been very excited about one of our ideas, which is developing an app in collaboration with the library so that you would know how many seats are available before you go, and which people have been quite excited about, which is great to see. Another thing that we'd like to do at the library is participate in the library space planning exercise, which will be done by the university librarian to assess the subscriptions that we already have, and some of them need to be moved to being online, and we'd participate in that space planning exercise to assess how space is used in the library and potentially freeing up more study space if that's what students want. In terms of academic policies to preserve the quality of education at Queen's, recently the Fine Arts program was suspended this past fall, and it became apparent that there is a void or a lack of sufficient policy to outline how deans or administrators go about making the decision to suspend a program, and we see this as a significant issue. So Team JDL would be a strong advocate that policy needs to be developed, and creating an academic environment and prioritizing academic programming and thinking about academics at Queen's needs to be done in collaboration with recognizing the financial situation of the university. Those two processes can't be separated.
RMS.
All right. So I think academic, I used to be wearing it. I think academic quality is definitely something we should all be concerned about. In terms of what we can do, the main thing we can really do is work with the administration and lobby the administration for change or against change if it is the case. Another thing I want to just bring up in terms of the applications that JDL proposes, I think they're a great idea, but I don't feel if they would be accessible to all students. Not everybody has a smartphone or a phone that's capable of using the applications. Also, in terms of academic quality, I think what JDL said is great in terms of the writing center and all the other supports on campus that can allow students to really improve their academic experience here at Queen's.
All right, so thank you, Patrick, for your question, or whichever one of the teams made it. And so I guess academic quality is something that's strongly affecting students here at Queen's, and is something that we're extremely aware of. It's not just about creating apps for a library to know how many spaces are going to be available and being able to go there and study. It's not about students wanting to study more or studying less. It's about what we're being offered as students. There's a constant debate this year in the Board of Trustees and Senate about how it is that financial situations are affecting our academic matters here in this university. What is the role of Senate? If Senate can approve a program or decide to suspend the program, what the Board of Trustees says, you don't have the funds for it. And so how is it that we go about that? In meetings with Alan Harris and the provost, there's a reason why he mentioned I am in charge of the budget and academic matters in this university. They go hand in hand. And so one of the things that we want to address is we want student government to be more proactive rather than reactionary. We feel that right now the AMS faculty societies are very reactive in terms of the administration does something and then we go ahead and take a stance and try and improve that. We don't want to be that. We want to be in the table ahead of time, knowing what's going to happen and changing that. Key example, 2015, solvency payments for the pension plan deficit are coming into place. That's $27 million every year for 10 years that the university can incur. That's something we want to be addressing right now so that our academic quality is not going to be changing in 2015. Thank you.
One thing that Team RMS disagrees with that Team JDL is proposing is this idea of the system in the library to monitor its usage. If your basic plan is to position something at the door that logs whenever somebody leaves or exits, how can you possibly design that system to not have such a significant margin of error that it's effectively useless because of students going to the writing center, students going to use conference rooms, and all the other services in the library?
Rebuttal.
How long do you
30 seconds.
So I'd like to address some things very quickly. First of all, on the accessibility of these apps. For the library app, it would actually also be fed into a website, so students without smartphones would be able to look at the rough percentage of occupancy in the library. Software is 97% full, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of the technology, I know I only have 30 seconds, so I will first encourage you to look at our fact sheets. A lot of government and commercial organizations use people counting software, and understandably, these entities also deal with factors like the ones that you mentioned, students who are going in to use the writing center who aren't necessarily sitting in seats. And the software companies that we've been in discussions with have developed
The final question from a team reads, teams mentioned gender-neutral bathrooms and the need to continue this project. There has been interest in the need to create policy and ensure that there are bathrooms in new buildings. Is this because you have concerns with the way the current policy is being passed, and did you have plans to alter this policy in some way? Further, are you planning to change the current plan for the retrofits developed by Physical Plant Services, the Human Rights Office, and the Social Issues Commission? Beginning with RMS.
Yeah. Team RMS wants to see gender-neutral bathrooms placed in any future constructions that the AMS has an influence in deciding how exactly they are constructed, and we're interested in trying to put gender-neutral bathrooms into any place where there's not a significant physical problem with it, like simple lack of physical infrastructure, plumbing, etc.
Okay, so with gender-neutral bathrooms, you'll notice they actually are not in our platform, and the reason being that this project will be completed by the end of this semester. I was the representative from the Social Issues Commission and the AMS working on this project. I conducted the scans myself, along with 3 volunteers throughout the summer. Policy has already been developed, and the policy states that gender-neutral bathrooms shall exist in new buildings. There will be 1 bathroom per floor in every new building on this campus. The policy did come up about a year ago, and it got caught up in principal, vice principal meetings. It came back to the Human Rights Office and Physical Plant Services. They revised. It's been passed through campus planning, and it's now currently in what used to be principal, vice principal meetings, but is now the provost, vice principal meetings, and is actually being passed right now. So that policy, there's been no issue with it, no concern. Further, there have been identified as 44 gender-neutral bathrooms on campus. Before the end of my term as Social Issues Commissioner, there will be an additional 50 gender-neutral bathrooms on this campus, with a plan in the next coming years to change several more. The ones that are being made now, they're only about $300 to switch over. The ones that are anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 come next. That requires to change the accessibility of the bathroom. It's not the actual bathroom itself. So that, again, will be in the next couple years. And then after that, it will be projects past $10,000 that will be completed. So this plan already is in place, the policy is in place, and will be completed before the end of this term. So we did not include it in our platform.
Great. So the only thing that I'd like to add, I guess, is obviously our team is very supportive of policy. If policy has already been passed, ensuring that retrofits and whatnot are done in a timely manner. And I think I would first like to commend the work of the Social Issues Commissioner this year on really taking this project and running with it. And the thing that I will add is that I don't think that it's right, unfortunately, that this was put on a student. This should have been done by the university. And I know how hard TK worked throughout the summer to assess literally every single washroom on campus. And so Team JDL strongly believes that things that are that should be the university's responsibility, advocating that that's not put on the backs of students. I don't think that's right, and I think that the university should take the responsibility for doing things that are in their jurisdiction.
Clarify slightly, while I did do the manual labor on this project and I was quite committed to it, the university did take the lead on the project. I joined it after it was part of CES's platform and they invited me in to work with my skills. However, the Human Rights Office and Physical Plant Services did do the work in the beginning and they do reserve recognition for that. I just worked with the policy a little bit and again with the actual scans themselves.
Now, excellent. Sweet, I can be louder if you need. So my first question dealt with one commission, and now I'm going to ask a question about a different commission. One of the most frequently used buzzwords in the AMS is accessibility. It's not always clear what that means, and sometimes it may seem to be a convenient catch-all excuse to effect change. So please outline what you believe accessibility to entail within the context of the AMS, and please also provide an example of an inaccessible situation, hypothetical or not, and please do not use physical accessibility as your example.
Starting with
Okay, so thank you for your question, Mackenzie. Obviously, accessibility is something that's very important to me in the work that I do, and I care deeply about it, as does the entire team. Accessibility means a lot of different things in different contexts. As you mentioned, it can mean physical accessibility. You're also looking at social accessibility. And then in terms of when we talk about accessibility in our platform, it includes both that and also the ability of students to reach out to their student leaders. So there are quite a few kinds of accessibility. And you did ask how we would ensure that it's accessible and an example. Is that?
Yeah, I was looking for what your definition is and then an example.
Okay. So you have to keep in mind all of those factors. And I think that a lot of people do often just think about physical accessibility. So part of that that we talk about a lot is being really open and ensuring that students can approach us. And on top of that, I just forgot to mention about financial accessibility as well. And a good example of that is looking at our student fees. In the last year, we came up with a bursary to provide for students who couldn't afford to pay the AMS mandatory fee. So making sure that we are working on that project as well will be very important to this team.
So accessibility is something that was included in our platform. We discussed physical accessibility, so I am not allowed to touch on that. I do think that it's important to think about not just physical accessibility, but what I will call social accessibility in terms of looking at the internal culture of the AMS and examining how that may or may not be welcoming to all students. So things such as a strong drinking culture. If someone doesn't choose to drink, that could be exclusive to that student. Or even, if I want to say financially accessible, if someone, the way that money is talked about in a social group may not be welcoming to all students. And so that's something that we definitely are prioritizing thinking about in terms of the executive leading, developing an internal social culture that is welcoming and accessible in that sense to all students. I'd like to comment on, while I can, on GPP's idea of holding open office hours and somehow thinking that students will passively come to the AMS. The fact is that it doesn't happen already, and I don't know why that would be different. And I'm actually quite surprised that this was in the platform of someone who's a commissioner who knows that the current VPUA at any given time has 3 or 4 meetings at once. It's just not possible to set aside an hour and promise that you'll be there. I think that outreach and promoting engagement in the society needs to be proactive. It's not acceptable to think that students will come to you if you're enacting a passive strategy to engage with students, especially if that's how you're approaching accessibility and approachability.
So I'm going to give an example from my area of expertise. I'm a linguistics major here at Queen's, and I've done a fair bit of study on second language acquisition. So first off, this is also related to language, policy language. When the members of the AMS have been through the process of being in the AMS and learned the lingo, they have an advantage that other people don't have. So part of the AMS reaching out, they need to reach out in language besides the language of policy. Also, as another example, oftentimes the perception of a strong accent actually has nothing to do with accent. It's mumbling, pausing, lack of volume. So in a situation where we're interviewing somebody for a job, oftentimes being a second language speaker of English means that the stress of being in that situation will amplify the fact that you're a second language learner. And it has nothing to do necessarily with your proficiency in English, but it becomes perceived as meaning that you don't have the language skills. We know that. I've talked to my teammates here about that. So we want to make sure that in hiring processes, that kind of linguistic issue doesn't come up.
Okay, so real quick, I think that we have agreed that having these open office hours is very important. How can we be a student government for students if students can't even come and talk to us? So it is very important that we have that. It is about prioritizing, and we will be prioritizing that quite high on our list. Of course, there'll be outreach and marketing available, and I think that a lot of it comes along with the attitude of the team. I think as so far, and as you'll see, if we're elected, the attitude that we have is any student can come to us, any problem. It's a casual situation, and we are very open to any feedback, any criticism that they may have.
Comment on that, I think that it's important to think about how you are prioritizing using your time as an executive. As I mentioned, the current executive often has 3 or 4 meetings at once, and though I do commend the principle behind having an open office hour and setting that time aside to speak with students, what are you giving up? If you're giving up being at a Senate meeting where you're the only student voice in that room, is that in the best interest of serving students? Decisions are made quickly, and if you're not there to be part of the discussion, to advocate on behalf of students, I don't think that's in students' interest either. As an executive, we would want to build a strong team who would be committed to engaging with students more regularly.
To me, accessibility means the ability to participate meaningfully. And in terms of being proactive to engage with students, one of our platform points is the executive live chat session, where every month we rotate around campus, we take your questions live or beforehand, and we respond candidly. We believe the online format will allow more students to feel like they can participate and not feel as intimidated as they are right now.
This is hard to juggle. Okay. So the AMS is sometimes criticized for the fact that it has annual turnover. This is seen as detrimental by a number of parties. Do you think that the current transition process is sufficient, or do you see ways to improve it? And I'm speaking about full-time staff mostly.
Starting with JDL.
Fantastic question. I think that annual turnover can be one of the greatest strengths of the AMS in that it provides regular new opportunities for students who haven't been engaged with the AMS before, and allowing students to commit to a time commitment that that works for them. You can agree to be part of the AMS and work for the AMS for a year, and then you can move on and do something else, or you can continue to be involved. So I think that's a wonderful thing in terms of providing opportunities. Obviously, it has detrimental effects in the sense of institutional memory. Looking at the transition processes as they currently stand, something that I think that we would be very committed to, obviously we've been doing research, and in many ways if we were successful would hit the ground running on February 2nd and beginning that transition process, and encouraging our staff to really prioritize and our team to prioritize transitioning on particular issues. And I think that there's an opportunity that hasn't been recognized in Transition Weekend, which isn't used as effectively as it might, in the sense of having an actual corporate transition weekend, or sorry, a society-wide transition weekend, and talking about where the society's at, where should we be going, and engaging both incoming and outcoming council in that kind of discussion, and using that as an opportunity.
All right, I'm going to use another quote because I love quotes. I'm not sure who quoted this, but it was a philosopher from many years ago, but it goes basically, it's impossible to begin to learn that which one thinks one already knows. I think that fits in with the one-year turnover. It gives more people opportunity to get in there and learn something fresh. You know, you have that year where you're learning your position, you're growing as a student, you're growing as a part of the AMS, and I think it's really important that it stays as a one-year term. Also, I had another point that I completely forgot, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you for your question, Allison. Don't know where you went, but thank you. There you are. The one-year turnover is extremely challenging. I found that as a commissioner, there are things that I know now that if I'd known last May, I definitely would have approached my position differently. And that is a real challenge. And it makes projects challenging as well, because there's an expiry date for how long you can have to complete those projects. And just because we're working a timeline doesn't mean people in administration are, and other people that we may be completing those projects with, such as in the municipality. I know that David Sinkinson has mentioned that as a challenge, that working with the city, they often want to take 2 years on a project that he really needs to finish in 1 year. So it is a huge concern. I think that for one, right now we do 20 hours of transition process that we are paid for. Many people do more, but a lot of it depends on your predecessor and their willingness to go over that amount. I also think that we should have a template and more of a structure for our transition manuals. I think we should have easier access to transition manuals from years past. I think that if I had seen some of the ones from 6 before, that would have also helped me. Making sure that we are really filling in our successors on our projects and attempting to bring those students into those projects earlier in the semester, as well as bringing them to meetings. And again, this is a step that some commissioners take. And some don't, and other full-time staff, so making sure that we are taking those steps to bring them in, and we are working to ensure that projects that take 2 years can take that 2 years if they have to, but that the next person in your position is able to complete that.
Next question comes from the floor.
I actually just remembered my other point, so I'm going to share it. In terms of transition, I think the transition process is pretty good right now. I agree with making sure it's more structured in terms of the transition manuals. It's something I think we mentioned in our platform in terms of when people are transitioning. We want to get involved as well as being the executive in terms of reading through all the transition manuals, and that way we can make more informed decisions when we're hiring the people that are coming in.
Hi, my name is Rachel Piltz. I have a question for Team JDL. One of your major platform points, reopening the Physical Education Center, seeks to increase facility space for Queen students. How much exactly will reopening the PEC cost, including maintenance costs? And who will be responsible for shouldering these costs? Will it become a student fee?
Okay, thank you for your question, Rachel. So yeah, the Physical Education Center has been a big part of our platform. One thing we thought a lot about is how we are going to complete this project. We really think that it needs to be a long-term initiative that is taken on by the university in coordination with the AMS and other parties as well. So to begin, one thing that we did in researching this project is speaking with other parties at the university as well. So we spoke with Athletics and Recreation, the Registrar, and Health Counseling and Disability Services, who all very, very much so support this initiative. So for funding, I actually spoke with the vice principal of facilities, Anne Brown, and she actually said it is impossible at this point to come up with a quote for the building, in that there are many problems in the inside and in the interior that need to be fixed, and so it's difficult to come up with an exact quote for each individual project. To list a couple, there is mold throughout the building. The fire alarm systems need to be replaced. There's the possibility of asbestos within the building as well. But these are things that are all fixable, and the building has not been condemned. So to kind of wrap this up, we really do believe that this needs to be a long-term initiative, and it will be funded by the university in the future. Thank you.
All right, so thank you for your question, Rachel. Where? Over there. All right, so this is something that Team GPP has also been researching, and it was interesting that it came up in JDL's platform. Some of the things we spoke with Ivan, he's a business manager. He works closely with Anne Brown at PPO Facilities. He said that it would indeed cost millions of dollars. He couldn't come up with an exact figure to reopen the PEC. He said in costs, operational costs alone, he said it's typically about $30 per square foot for utilities per year. The PEC is a building that is about 80,000 square feet to around 90,000. He couldn't even give me that number. So you're talking about a ballpark of $2.5 million per year just to keep it running. Now you have to know how much it's going to cost in order to open it. We need to make the decision. The university doesn't have money right now to come up with these types of projects. Now you have, all right, do we cut programs? Do we cut academic quality because of lack of funding? Or do we create and restore this building that's supposed to be teared down?
Yes, thank you. So one thing we wanted to touch on actually is that the university actually is no longer going to be completing the Queen Center project. This is something that we thought a lot about as a team and would really like the university to complete the Student Life Center project, as we would say the JDA Queen Center and the PEC for the future as well. We really do believe that this needs to be a priority for the university, and we'd like to make it that so that we can actually complete this project in the future as well. There is actually a priority as well right now with advancement for student life, which is something Mira touched on earlier. So it would be possible to raise funds for this project as well in the future, and we think the university would make this a priority.
Next question comes from Isabel Shane on Twitter, and the question reads, what role should the AMS play in provincial and federal lobbying associations such as CFS and OUSA? Starting with GPP.
Okay, well, thank you for your question, Isabel. So the AMS currently affiliates itself with OUSA, the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance. And to those meetings, we do send regularly the Academic Affairs Commissioner, as well as the Vice President University Affairs. The Vice President University Affairs is our voting member, of course, in that situation. The Academic Affairs Commissioner goes as an observer, as well. The President has gone on occasion to OUSA as well. It's very important that we do work with these lobbying groups. There are larger changes that we need to be looking at, such as providing more funding from the government to schools and also financial aid. Recently, it's actually under CFS, they're talking about the Drop Fees campaign because they have revealed information that The government got rid of the $15 billion ceiling in terms of providing funding to students. They originally said they would only give out that much in student loans years back, and now they have removed that ceiling, so we will continue to be giving out student loans and not really looking at the consequences of that. So we do need to be working with these groups, and specifically with USA as the group we are aligned with currently, to be working to lobby the government and lobby alongside our partners at other universities to create real change. It is much more effective coming from the variety of universities that are involved in USA to lobby for that. So it's very important that we take an active role, that our voting member on USA is well versed and does look for student feedback, and that our observers are very aware of student need as well.
Thanks for the question, Isabel, wherever you are. So in terms of addressing the role that the AMS, I believe that was the question, the role the AMS should play in provincial and federal lobbying organizations. As TK already explained, we are currently affiliated with the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance, which is a provincial post-secondary lobby group that represents AMS member Queen's students to the provincial government. And I think that in my capacity as the Academic Affairs Commissioner, the way that I've approached being a resource member on steering committee this year is you're there in the room to ensure that USA is working for students, for Queen's students. Queen's students have decided that they wanted to be represented by USA, and you're present as VPUA or as Academic Affairs Commissioner to ensure that that's happening in the most cost-effective and policy-effective manner. So some advocacy priorities that USA has been working on recently is identifying ways to work in policy changes in the tuition framework, which is being reworked in 2012, and ensuring that any increases to tuition are tied to inflation. Queen's was a founding member in USA and has traditionally held a leadership role, being a vocal member of steering committee. And that's something that obviously I would like to continue if we remain affiliated with USA and if we are successful in this election. For example, something that came to my attention as the Academic Affairs Commissioner is that having all of our tuition due on September 1st is a huge barrier for a lot of students. And in terms of what role the AMS can play on those lobbying groups, you can bring things like that up that affect Queen's students specifically and making that a lobby priority for the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance and ensuring that Queen's students are actually represented at a provincial level and ensuring that academic issues affecting students on this campus are on the radar of organizations that have a better ability than the AMS does to advocate and lobby the provincial government.
Could you just repeat the question quick for me? Is that possible?
What role should the Queen's AMS play in provincial federal lobbying associations, such as CFS and OUSA?
Okay, I agree that we should remain affiliated with USA. I think that's a very important affiliation. As for the other one, which I made you repeat the question so I'd remember the acronym, and I already forgot it again. But they have had some issues with lobbying recently, and they are getting a lot of criticism in the way they're lobbying. So I don't think we need to affiliate with them, but our affiliation with USA is very important. I also just want to point out that historically, when USA was on the upswing, that's when Queen's was part of them, and when they weren't doing so well, we left. We actually rejoined just recently. And we're also one of the only universities with 2 members sitting on USA. Our VP University Affairs and also the Academic Affairs Commissioner sit on USA. So that's something we really need to keep, and I think USA does a great job of lobbying for student voice. Currently, they lobbied when the 30% tuition grant came out. They lobbied to make it more accessible to students. They were able to get it so that students with disabilities could be 6 years out of high school rather than 4, which I think is very important. Thanks.
So first off, I'm going to take the opportunity to plug recruitment. Anyone who's here that's interested in any of the opportunities that the AMS provides next year, they've mentioned a lot of them. AMS staff are here to answer your questions, and we have information at the back about our opportunities and hiring deadlines. On the topic of recruitment, the AMS provides over 1,000 opportunities for volunteering and part-time and full-time jobs. Although the VPUA oversees at least 6 full-time staff, these staff and the VPUA are ultimately responsible for recruiting hundreds of volunteers for the government side. But without fail, every year some of the positions need to be reopened and specifically promoted, a problem that the corporate side of the AMS sees much less often due to offering more paid positions. As VPUA, what would you do with the commissioners and the recruitment team to improve specifically volunteer recruitment?
Starting with JDL.
Thank you very much for that question, Amanda. So I think that, sorry, your question was how would we improve recruitment? Volunteer recruitment. Okay, wanted to make sure I was going the right way. I think that something that we recognize as being a huge stride this year that I think I've already touched on a little bit is the work that the HR, marketing, and communications officers have done this year in terms of creating a cohesive outreach strategy during orientation week. And what Team JDL would want to do is work to develop an outreach coordinator, as I was saying earlier, who would have work to run events to promote the AMS having a constant and ongoing presence on campus. And I think that, to answer your question long-term first, interestingly enough, having that ongoing presence of the AMS repeatedly throughout the year and having students know that the AMS is there, it's not a blue tent that disappears in September because everyone is so busy, but having someone who's designated to be responsible for that throughout the year, because frankly, I know the HR all the officers that I listed earlier have so many other things to do during the year. And so that would be my long-term strategy, is ensuring that our team would be very committed to the AMS having an ongoing presence on campus. And hopefully that would lead to a longer-term cultural shift on campus for students to know that the AMS is available and for recruitment to be more successful.
All right, thanks for the question. I think I'm just going to hold this up while I talk. I think that the Marketing and Communications Office. Oh, forgot. All right, I think thanks for the question. So I'm going to hold this up while I talk because I think it's important. The first point is Tuesday, January 24th, 2012. Peer Support Center volunteers, MAC committee volunteers, and Finers committee members. So obviously this is a great initiative. The Marketing and Communications Office in the AMS has done a great job this year, and it's definitely something we need to carry forward. In terms of our plans, with our executive live chat session, I think that's going to engage more students with the AMS. We can also make that a discussion about volunteer opportunities. Another thing we need to make sure we do is make sure that volunteers feel appreciated. If you're a volunteer, you're not being paid, but there's a possibility that we could offer honorariums and just other ways that we could make volunteers feel appreciated by maybe having a party, some kind of initiatives to make them feel like they're very, very appreciated for what they do.
Thank you for your question, Amanda. So I'm probably going to echo a couple of things that were said by both teams. One, Marketing Communications and Human Resources did an amazing job this year. I know that in my own commission, the numbers were quite high, and I didn't have a whole lot of positions that I had to reopen. I did have some that I had to pester Alex about consistently to be reopening. But overall, there has been a great improvement. So I think that there needs to be a real conversation between the new executive and the current people holding those positions in terms of what strategies you guys see coming for next year. That's really important during that transition process. Because obviously you did something right this year, and we need to be continuing that as well. And I would agree with Amira that the outreach during orientation was very effective, and the fact that all of the commissioners and directors were around and giving out snow cones and having fun and that kind of stuff really seemed to bring people over to our booth to ask about it. So little things like that made a huge difference, and that's something I'd really be interested in discussing. I also think we need to be reaching out more into our clubs that would have similar interests to our committees and advertising within them for reasons why they might be interested in being on our committees. I think we also need to be advertising more the benefits that you get by being a committee member, a committee chair, a deputy, and what that experience really provides. And I think that there are a lot of students who can speak very well to how their volunteer experience has really changed what it's like to be here at Queen's. And I think that we really need to be doing some more marketing around that in terms of how that does change the experience. Going off a little bit of what Sean said, I think that we need an AMS-wide strategy for volunteer appreciation. We tried to centralize it somewhat this year, but it is still fairly sporadic. So making sure that we really are figuring out how, as an AMS, are we appreciating our volunteers together, because I know that the work that I do in my commission for appreciation is different from the others. And then finally, I would add that I think, and it's something that I wish I had done this year, was to sit down as a commissioner with my team, so with my deputies and Marketing Communications and Human Resources, to talk about it, because we do recruit as a 4-person team in my own. And I wish that we had sat down and had that conversation about how the 4 of us could have been more effectively recruiting, where we should be looking, and how we can advertise to our committee members who'd be interested in becoming chairs why they should take that opportunity, what the benefit of being a chair is.
Okay. So my name is Alex Miller, and I'm the current AMS Human Resources Officer. I actually had a question that kind of went along the lines of Amanda's there in regards to volunteer retention, but you all did comment on that somewhat with that question as well. So I'm going to skip to my second question here. So a big part of your role as the AMS executive is not only being a leader and external representative of the society day to day, but being a manager of your council and extended council. As although they quite often have a lot of autonomy in their roles, they are in fact your staff. What strategies and steps will you take as an executive team to support being an effective manager to these positions, especially in regards to supporting them when the challenges of their positions become incredibly straining? Sorry. If you need me to repeat any of that, I certainly can.
Begin with RMS.
All right, thanks a lot. So in terms of management, I don't really like the word management. I'd rather it was, working with your team or just some other word. I don't know. Just management doesn't work for me. But I do have experience managing teams. I have worked at a software company where I was the head of sales, so I had a sales department working under me. Well, I should say working with me. But I think it's really important that we reach out and we share ideas. I mentioned that in my opening. Information sharing is super important. I want to feel like everybody on our team is part of the team and their voice can be heard. And I think that's what's really important in terms of, making management not necessarily that you're managing, but you're working with your team, and anything that your team shares with you is going to be appreciated. And Briar's going to add something.
In addition, I have for the past 9 years been involved in something called the Canadian Improv Games, which is a high school level improv tournament. I used to be a member, now I run it. The fundamental focus of this organization has always been creating teams that work well together. I learned about this for 4 years in high school, and I've been teaching it for 5 years. Although improv sounds kind of geeky, if you want to get down to what it's really about, it's about the ability to share ideas on your team, not get upset when your idea is changed and adapted and made better. It's about putting aside your ego and just working with, like Sean said, working with your team. And I have a lot of experience doing that. I have taught at conferences. I have taught staff members here at Queen's.
Thank you for your question, Alex. So this is something where I think my experience this year will help with my experience of being a commissioner, because you're right, these jobs get really hectic. They can get overwhelming, and sometimes there's just a lot going on, and often things that you are emotionally tied to for various reasons as well. So I think that the first step is to recognize that, and also recognize that on top of being your staff, these students are also still attending school. They still have personal lives, and they still have problems as well. And that's extremely important to note. We really need to be looking at the mental health and well-being of our staff, also very important. And something this year that I found that Kieran Slabona as VPUA has been very effective at doing is noting when something has been too much for me, or when my schoolwork has become too much, or when I really need him to take some of the burden of something for me. So as part of your role as VPUA and as an executive as a whole, you have to be ready to step in when your team needs you. Just as I would expect my teammates to step in when I needed them, I'm going to step in for my commissioners when they need me. Obviously, it's a busy job. You also have your own responsibilities, but a large part of your responsibility is in terms of supporting the commissioners. And this year, when I have needed it, Kieran has recognized that, and it's been really important. So you need to see your employees not just as your employees, but as students and as people who still have other concerns in their lives.
Okay, thank you for the question, Alex. So in terms of management, I think it's not easy to define management as one simple thing. I know, speaking from my experience, I acted as the Common Ground head manager this past year, or last year actually, sorry. So I supervised 5 assistant managers with large portfolios and 125 staff as well. I think management is a really day-to-day activity. It requires many things. First of all, leadership, I think. And being a good leader means many different things, and you have to be able to lead by example. And to do so, I think you have to show that you're working as hard, if not harder than everybody working below you, in order to gain their respect. Another part is humility, and I think this is really important in that in order to manage, you have to be able to take criticism as well. And it's very important that you can respond to criticism from the people working below you and those working above you as well, actually, in order to best suit the needs of everyone surrounding you. I think that these executive jobs are in many ways related to advocacy, as we've been talking about, but your first role in many ways is as a manager as well, and that you're overseeing many different volunteers, many staff, many other full-time staff here that are all full-time students as well. These aren't easy jobs, and you need really, really strong leadership and strong management at the top of the corporation. It's all about a trickle-down effect and leading by example, and I really do think that, that the three of us could really provide that in the AMS this coming year. Thank you.
Cool. This next question actually comes from the AMS's current Orientation Roundtable Coordinator. Where do you see Orientation Week in 10 to 15 years, and what specifically would you do during your term to get it there? What are the difficulties posed to long-term planning by a not-for-profit organization with annual turnover, and how would you overcome these difficulties? Please make sure to answer both questions. It was kind of, it wasn't a run-on sentence. Note. Where do you see Orientation Week in 10 to 15 years, and what specifically would you do during your term to get it there? What are the difficulties posed to long-term planning by a not-for-profit organization with annual turnover, and how would you overcome these difficulties? Please make sure to answer both questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Dimitri and Jillian, for relaying that question to us. So I'm going to answer the first half, but I promise that Rico will indeed answer the second half, so don't worry. I think that Orientation Week needs to maintain a lot of aspects that it has now. We'd really like to preserve the traditions that have been around for so long, so those are aspects that we wouldn't be looking to change. However, very recently, actually, the new head Gill, Angeli, wrote a very interesting op-ed in the journal about reasons why she wasn't interested in being a Gill at first, as someone who is more shy and perhaps didn't know that Orientation Week was the right place for her. And I think that that's a barrier that we really need to be overcoming. Obviously, Angeli did, and I think that that perspective that she's bringing this year is a very interesting and a great one to be working with. And this year, I have a lot of interest in working with students like her who say, Orientation Week didn't feel like it was for me because of this and this and this reason. And we need to be making sure that we are providing opportunities for students who necessarily don't want to run around and cheer super loud all the time. And we need to make sure that they are feeling still welcomed and oriented to this university. So in my term, I would really like to look for those students that we aren't reaching out to in terms of Orientation Week and who aren't being satisfied, and students who opt not to come and reasons why. And I think that there's a lot of feedback to be found there. So again, just to reiterate, ensuring that we are preserving the traditions, but really making Orientation Week as accessible and open to as many students as possible.
Thank you, TK, and thank you, Dimitri, as well. So along with on the lines that TK was mentioning, in terms of difficulties for long-term planning by nonprofit organization, some of the things that we want to consider is that Orientation Week, aside from ORT, is handled by faculty societies, and so leaving that independence of faculty societies dealing with their own week and taking the leadership that wherever it is that they want to take. Us as the AMS, we're not going to be directing a vision of where we want Orientation Week, for example, for engineering to be headed. That's up to the OC of engineering and the engineering society. And so recognizing the degree that faculty societies play with this and offering support to them so that logistically everything is happening properly and that we're lobbying with the administration and with bodies of Senate such as SORB.
Okay, thank you for the question, Dimitri. I think I'd like to preface this by talking a little bit about Orientation Week and my experience with orientation as well. In my time here, I actually had the opportunity to volunteer as a Gale and as an OC on the Orientation Committee for Arts and Science. I really do think Orientation Week is in many ways one of the most important weeks of your entire university experience. It is your first introduction to this university and the traditions and the incredible atmosphere that we have here. It's really the time that you're able to connect with the many different opportunities that you can get involved in, as well as your academic life at Queen's. So I think in many ways the importance of orientation comes down to that it is continually student run. I think having been involved in orientation for 3 years of my time here and having had some of the best experience I've ever had in my entire life in that week, I think it's extremely important that it remains student run, not only for the value for first year students, but also those upper years who are involved in the planning of the orientation week. it's a very incredible and one of the greatest learning experiences to be able to act as a leader and plan the events for those weeks as well. And I think this is something that Mira wanted to add to as well, to a certain extent.
I just wanted to touch on the first part of Dimitri's question, where will Orientation Week be in 10 to 15 years? I think a real strength of having annual turnover and being a student government is that change can emerge organically, and I don't think it would be appropriate for me to stand here and say this is where Orientation Week should be in 10 to 15 years, other than remaining completely student-run. And I think that who knows where it will be. I'm sure fabulous places, and many Dimitris into the future will take it there. And I think that, yeah, I just wanted to comment that how I would answer that question is ensuring that it remains completely student-run, and that SORB remains a Senate committee with strong student representation.
For a little background on me, I was the fine arts chair for the past year, and I sat on ORT this year. And so I know a lot about why ORT is important. In terms of this year's improvements, they introduced an online component to ORT so that every faculty society could be on there. They also had a Not in Res tab, which really helped specifically with finers. And their training has really improved. They've really tried to promote inter-faculty mingling and meshing and positive experience between them. They really tried to promote mental health first responders by inviting Dr. Condra in to speak with them. I think that's great, and that should continue. They brought the concert back to campus this year. That, I hope, will stay for the next 10 to 15 years. And beyond that, into the future beyond that, sorry. And in terms of where I think also things should be going, there should be a shopping cart where you can just click, like online registration, I want to click on that and that to sign up. I think it could do a lot with alternative faculty weeks. I'm not sure whether Dimitri's doing that already this year, but I hope it happens. And in terms of what I think ORT does really well, it's basically a place where you can get collective group orders on t-shirts and the like. And it's also a voice on SORB, where it relays information back to the members on the roundtable and lobbies for them to SORB.
All right, I'm just going to add a little bit here since I just went through Orientation Week a few months ago. Orientation Week was great. It was one of my best experiences at Queen's so far, without a doubt. And I think we need to make sure that it does stay student-run and it does remain to be that positive experience that it is. If it wasn't for Orientation Week, I would have never met Jeff and Briar. I met them on my first day in Finers Orientation, and I also met a lot of great friends in the Art Sci Orientation Week. So without Orientation Week, I think a lot of students at Queen's University would kind of feel a little bit lost.
Hi, my question is directed towards all the VP UA candidates. You guys kind of touched upon this earlier, but Ontario has like one of the highest undergrad tuitions in the country, resulting in higher student debt year by year. This acts as a barrier to all students attending university. And as we all know, with the recent 30% tuition grant made available to all students, a majority of students, including myself, aren't eligible for this tuition grant. So as incoming VP UA and a member of the USA steering committee, specifically how would you support and advocate for a reduction in tuition fees instead of simply capping it as a way of increasing the financial accessibility at Queen's?
It's a very topical question. Thank you so much for that, Frank. I think that, so the way that this is done, AMS students, as we mentioned earlier, or AMS member Queen's students, are represented to the provincial government currently through the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance. And that's really the VPUA's main tool and main position and opportunity to advocate at a provincial level on behalf of Queen's students. And I think that USA's taken a role in terms of taken a lobbying position regarding the Ontario tuition grant and wanting to expand eligibility. I think it's important to work with the, sorry, I just totally lost my frame of thought. USA's taken a position on expanding eligibility for the tuition grant. Currently, you're not eligible if you're 4 years or more out of high school. You're not eligible if you're from out of province. And I think that there's definitely an opportunity for the current VPUA and future VPUAs to advocate that eligibility is expanded and that accessibility, financial accessibility, remains a priority for the provincial government.
So Sean has passed this one to me. So I'm going to tell a little story about this one because I feel it's topical. During the last provincial election, there was I believe it was the provincial election. There was a point at which an elderly gentleman got up, stood in front, and went on a delightful rant, much to the anger of the audience, about how he remembered in his day when high school was moving towards a free public model that everyone used the same arguments against making high school free that they now use against making university free. Fundamentally, if we're moving into a world where a post-secondary education is the only way you get a job, we have to make university free. And this is a huge thing. I don't know when this is going to happen. In the meantime, I really think it should definitely be expanded for mature students. Also, I think targeted programs that look to help students in need from particular backgrounds, Aboriginal students, rural students, because student debt can really affect those students more than others. There's a good section in our platform that I wrote about the effects that student debt can have on rural students. I encourage you to read it. And I think that's it.
Thank you. What? I just wanted to talk. It's not funny. My feelings are hurt. So thank you for your question, Frank. I think it's a great question. And I think that a lot of what it has to do with is the attitude that you're approaching these issues with. Tuition isn't becoming too high. Tuition is too high. And that's the attitude that you have to be taking going into this. It's not about keeping tuition at a certain point or capping it, as you mentioned. It is really about the fact that it is in a place now that's inaccessible. It's not becoming inaccessible. It's already a problem. And that's something you have to recognize in this position, and recognize that when you go to USA and when you're working with these issues, you need to be advocating that we are already in a crisis. We are already having a problem. This isn't something we're preventing. So I think that that has a lot to do with it, is having that attitude, and that is how you are going to lobby. You're going to lobby that it is too high now, and we need to be looking for reduction strategies, not capping strategies, and not strategies that leave out so many students who need that assistance. And I think that a lot of going to USA will require a lot of consulting. We do have great committees who do work on financial accessibility, including the Students Against Poverty and also the financial aid share underneath the Academic Affairs Commission, and working with those students and other students to make sure that we are effectively ready to lobby in these meetings. Further, I think that we need to be looking at what we're doing as a student government, so that I can go to USA and be going to the government and saying, we are working on things here. We need you to work on your end as well. And that requires ensuring that we're supporting the bursary for our student fees, and also working with student awards who are currently revamping their website in order to make scholarships and financial aid more available and more accessible to students, so that we're working to change things where we can, so we can say to the government, say to USA, we are working, now you need to work too.
Okay, I just wanted to take a quick second to really wholeheartedly agree with what TK was saying about lobbying and USA. I think this is very, very, very critical, and we need to make sure that we continue to do this and have a strong voice.
Can I rebuttal myself? Am I allowed to just add to? That's strange. So what I wanted to say earlier, I'm so sorry. What I wanted to say is that in approaching lobbying through currently USA, it's really important that the VPUA understands that personal politics are aside, and you get your mandate from policy manuals passed by AMS Assembly. And in approaching the issue of financial accessibility, it is in policy manual through the representation manual that students have voted on that they want tuition to be a 70-30 cost sharing split. And so I think that that is the approach that I would take to that, consulting the policy manuals that we have.
Any other rebuttals?
Hi, Nick Francis, Queen's Rector. So my question is, you have all mentioned that you will work with the administration to make improvements and craft solutions to problems facing students. But say the administration does not respond well to your goals. In other words, you do not see eye to eye. What will your steps be in this scenario, and how will you go about solving the issue with this resistance? And what do you find to be the most effective approach in doing so? Thanks.
Team RMS.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that real quick? I apologize.
So yeah, you have all mentioned that you will work with the administration to make improvements and craft solutions to problems facing students. And say the administration does not respond well to your goals. In other words, you do not see eye to eye. What will your steps be in this scenario, and how will you go about solving the issue with this resistance? And what do you find to be the most effective approach in doing so?
Okay, thanks for the question. I believe that if the administration doesn't see eye to eye with us, that we just need to make sure we reiterate our points and we kind of explain where we're coming from. I think that's really important. We need to make the university administration aware of where students come from and what they want and what they need in their university experience. We can't just lobby at them and say, we want this. We have to explain why we want it.
Thank you for your question, Nick. So I've already faced this a little bit in my role, wanting something from admin and not getting it. And I think that the approach that I would take in this position is really working with more students on this issue. If the admin says something's wrong with it, whatever it is that we're working for, come back, analyze why they said that, and work to solutions to find that, and then or to work against their problems. But also, if it's an issue that we really do feel strongly we need to keep pursuing, I think that there's a lot to be said with sitting down with the heads of the faculty societies and engaging them in the issue as well, and working out a campus-wide strategy through student associations for getting what it is that we need. I think if we're coming at the administration as more than just the AMS, if we're coming with all of our faculty societies and other representatives and saying, as a group, we are all asking for this, that can really be more effective than just coming from the AMS.
Sure. Thank you, Nick, for your question. I'd just like to add a little bit to what TK was mentioning. He did steal quite a bit of my thunder. But one of it was working with the rector, the undergraduate student trustee, the SGPS as well. It's not only just faculty side, but students at large. AMS Assembly. I do believe that AMS Assembly can use a lot more discussion rather than just simply passing motions, but rather discussing, you know what, this is an issue that's affecting the university. How are we going to discuss it? How are we going to move forward together? And so then presenting to the administration, getting their feedback, what is the problems that you have, bringing it back to discussion. There's a reason for why when you go through Senate, things usually go to Senate, and they refer to committee, then refer back to Senate. It takes a while, but I think it's an efficient way of getting enough feedback from students and presenting opportunities and options again to the administration and hopefully pass those things.
Great question. So I think that first and foremost, I really like the way that GPP framed this question in terms of consulting with other student leaders, consulting with the rector, consulting with faculty societies, consulting with students, and determining what the issues are, what students' concerns are about an issue through a collaborative and widespread consultation process. I think that in my experience working as the Academic Affairs Commissioner now, something that I've noticed is that administrators really appreciate it when you speak their language. So lay out student concerns very clearly and then tell them what you want them to do. Identify concrete policy changes or initiatives or projects that they can do to address your concerns. If you just say, we're frustrated, there's nothing they can do with that necessarily, or they don't always think there's something they can do with that. And so always trying to maintain a constructive dialogue. That being said, there are definitely times when an AMS executive needs to take a hard stance on something to really stand up for students and to take a stance on behalf of students. And I think that it's important to note that the AMS, representing 14,000 undergraduate students, has a really strong voice, but it only has a strong voice when it's led by a strong executive.
All right, I just wanted to take a quick moment to really agree with what TK, Rico, and Mira were saying about working with the other faculties, working with the rector, working with SGPS to make sure that we are able to work well with the administration. I think that's all I really wanted to use my 30 seconds for. Thanks.
Our final question will come from Ty.
All right, Ty Green, president. The AMS is meant to represent. The AMS is meant to represent the entirety of the undergraduate population at Queen's and to provide support for and lobby on behalf of students in all faculties when they face challenges. I would like you to select a faculty under the AMS of which you are not a part, describe a problem they are facing, and outline the ways you will help students in this faculty overcome this problem.
All right, so I'll take this one. I've worked closely with different faculty societies during this past year, being a part of President's Caucus, and something that GPP wants to do during the coming year is to actually schedule those meetings so that they happen on a consistent basis and that we don't have to be sending emails. And it's no offense to Morgan or anyone else who's part of the President's Caucus, because we've all been very busy, but it's a matter of getting that structured and getting together. I know one of the problems, for example, that CISA is facing is the GPA system in their prof courses, for example, which are on a used to be pass-fail basis and now are graded on a 1, 2, 3, or 4-point scale rather than a complete GPA scale. For engineering, there's ongoing, I guess, problems with Orientation Week. I was working closely with Elena, the OCA for Orientation Week for Engineering Society, as I was a SORB representative to engineering. And so that was something that was really interesting to work with, keeping those traditions. I know it's something that they're very passionate about. And so those are some of the specific things. There's obviously a lot more for other faculties.
Okay, I'm going to choose two if that's okay with you. I'm going to choose the Nursing Student Society, and one of the problems that they're facing right now, or nurses in general, is that when they register for their courses, they have so many mandatory courses that they have to take that they're scrambling to find electives. And navigating the SOLA student system, I mean, I was on the other side of it at the registrar this past summer. It's even difficult navigating over there. Telling nursing students that they have to find a class at Tuesday night at 6:30 because that's the only time they have off, and then telling them to go to SOLAS and find it. It's too difficult, it takes too long, and it's not really fair to nursing students. So one of the things we address in our platform is creating a guide for nursing students and of course other faculty societies and other programs that have these sort of restrictions and are forced to look for electives like mad on SOLAS. It is a full list of all the electives that will fit in the areas of their schedule where there are 3 hours for a night class, where they don't already have classes or practicums scheduled. Additionally, I'm going to move on to the second one, and if you don't mind, I'll talk about FICSA. I remember one of the problems this year is you guys had a lot of trouble filling your events, getting a lot of people out to your, was it Snow Jam? Is that what it was called? Your ski event, ski and snowboard event. I think one of the things that the AMS can offer you guys is marketing and communication support. FICSA is a very small student society, and Phys Ed and Kinesiology is a very small faculty. That being said, I'm sure you guys would be welcome to having students from other faculties come to your events as well. It also provides a lot more collaboration between the AMS and these smaller student societies if you guys start using our marketing resources, our communication resources, even the online campus calendar. These are things that the AMS needs to communicate to these faculty societies at the beginning of the year or even over the summer, so that the faculty societies start running. They start with this support from the AMS and continue throughout the year. So just to round up, nursing, an electives guide, as well as other smaller faculties and programs, and FICSA as my example, and other smaller faculty societies using the AMS resources such as marketing and communications. Thank you.
Hi. So I think one of the most important issues facing most faculties is the GPA system. The choice of 4.3 I don't fully understand. And also just from the sciences point of view, it doesn't make sense. And also as a fourth year student, when they changed back from percentage grades to letter grades, it just works against you generally, worked against me anyway. And I just like to plug also assembly. When I have watched as a gallery member, I find the discussion a lot more interesting, and I think that's one area where we can get students more involved and get their voices heard. Like when they're discussing the GPA system, there aren't a lot of people in the gallery, but I think a lot of people would like to be in that gallery when that's being discussed. So I really would like to see that happen in terms of advertising when discussion is happening, and maybe change when it's happening possibly.
Yep. One other thing I wanted to point out about the GPA is that it doesn't just affect particular faculties. I'm an arts and science student, but my work is still based on a single right analysis, which means it still means that, you know, that 1% difference is really, you know, important for me.
All right, and I am also going to add something to this because I am running for the VPUA position. In terms of the GPA, it's something we're not going to be able to get rid of. We're going to have to keep the GPA. What we need to do is educate the faculty on how to mark properly with the GPA system. They need to stop using percentage grades and then converting them to GPA. That doesn't work. They need to be able to use the system. They need to be educated on how you mark in a GPA system. And I think that's really what we need to do to make sure that the GPA system works properly here at Queen's.
Before we get to closing statements, I'd like to remind everyone that there's 2 more debates. Tomorrow's debate is at 7 p.m. at Cobro, and it's for the VP operations. And on Wednesday night is the president debate. It's a secret only, you guys.
So tomorrow night, debate is at Cobro at 7 p.m., which is the VP operations debate. On Wednesday night is the presidential debate in the JDoc, and that will also begin at 7 p.m. I strongly encourage you to come out to those, and those will also be live streamed as well, I believe, on the same link. So you can bookmark the link so you have something to do for 3 hours for half this week. So with that, we will go in reverse speaking order for closing statements, starting with Team RMS, followed by GPP, and concluding with JDL. RMS.
All right, thanks for all the questions, guys. The debate has been so much fun. It's my first debate ever, so I had a really good time. While doing my research in terms of getting to know the AMS, getting to know Queen's, and getting to know the whole community in general, I ran across a really good quote from a recent alumni that graduated in 2010. I'm just going to share it with you all. It goes, "I'm not part of the immediate Queen's community anymore, but as an alumni, there's one change I'd really like to see. I was definitely one of those lost people at Queen's. I was very lost for 4 years, and 3 to 4 years at Queen's, I would come home in the summer wondering if I would ever return to the school next year. For people who are lost, it's sometimes hard to pull yourself back into the high spirit of the Queen's community. It's like a jump rope game where you don't know when exactly to jump back in, and in the fear of making a fool of yourself by getting back out there, sometimes that makes you stay on the outside permanently. Queen's loves you was such a blessing to my spirit and my overall outlook on Queen's. Little did I know it would be my last event at Queen's, and how glad I am now that to have found the courage to get out of bed and participate. Sometimes that spirit of making new friends and meeting new people, university-wide, dies the day Frosh Week is over. I think it's important to have true student appreciation days that encourage everyone to relive that Frosh Week and remember what it's all about. I fell in love with the closeness of the community, and it can easily get lost in schoolwork, jobs, and your own, sometimes due to lack of time, involvement in direct school events. I came to Queen's for the spirit, found it during Frosh Week, and never truly felt it again until it was time for me to go. It'd be nice if the future of Queen's could see more of it." I think this is a really great quote, and I think it's very important, and it's something we all need to think about. And I'm going to leave you with that, let you think about it. I'm not going to share my thoughts, but if you want to talk to me after the debates, I can definitely do that. I'm going to take a moment, though, just to plug our website and stuff again. So you can check out our platform, our bios, all that on voterms.com. Follow us on Twitter at voterms, and like us on Facebook. We really welcome discussion and criticism, and we want to make this a spirited, discussion-based campaign. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for all your incredible questions. There's a lot of stuff that I personally really care about, and the issues range from everything to tuition to university district to riding the divide. There's just a great variety of questions for both AMS insiders and students at large. That was really amazing to see, and I'm glad you guys stuck it out to the end. I remember sitting at the back last year, crammed in the corner, thinking like, what are these people going on about? I don't even know. So I know it's long, and it's really great that you guys are still here, and I do encourage you to come out and see Duncan tomorrow night and the other VP Ops and Rico and the presidential candidates on Wednesday. Just in closing, I think that something that our team recognizes that's really important is that we aren't just running a corporation. We are dealing with student experience. We are dealing with students' problems, students' concerns, their needs, and their wants. And that will always come first. And that is why we do run on the platform of being approachable, accountable, and accessible, because it is about you. We are your employees. We are working for you. And if we ever lose sight of that, we will not be an effective student government. And that is something that is extremely important to our team. I believe that we have crafted both a responsible and a realistic platform. And again, we are also open to feedback, and I really do appreciate the feedback that we've gotten this far. And also, you can check out our platform if you'd like on votegpp.com. There are a lot of other platform points that weren't touched on tonight that probably will come up in the next debates, so that should be interesting. But you can feel free to peruse them tonight if you'd like to before all that happens. We're also on Twitter at VoteGPP, and we are also on Facebook at facebook.com/VoteGPP. So you should check that out. It's pretty fun. I apparently find very weird things fun, but no, it's cool. But yeah, I do encourage you to stay involved. It is really important, and we really do appreciate your feedback. I'd also like to commend the other candidates up here. You guys did a great job tonight. Some really tough, interesting questions, and I'm really excited to see what happens the rest of the campaign. So good job, guys.
Thank you. So I'd like to address a specific issue in my closing statement. At the beginning we talked about, I guess I talked about how we are a team that was united by our passion and our commitment to the Queen's community and what we think the AMS is and can be and should be for students. We're running because we really believe that we have the passion and the dedication and the experience to fulfill these positions to the best interest and to the best benefit of the student body. As I mentioned, I want to take this opportunity to address a specific issue that came up during this debate, and that is our idea of reopening the Physical Education Center. This is a big idea. This is a long-term idea. We know that. We've done the research to determine that it's feasible, and we've included it because we think that it's important that your student government serves students that are currently here, but also thinks big and has a long-term vision for student life on campus, a long-term vision for the academic learning environment that we have here at this university. Students deserve an AMS executive that thinks in that way, and the Queen's Center project will not be completed. So we have to stand here today and think, where do we go next? This is a university that is sorely lacking space. We've done our research. We know that the university realizes this and knows that they need to invest in existing buildings. We've identified key partners in bringing this to the table with the university. Athletics and Recreation wants to reopen the PEC so that they would have more facilities. Intramurals are currently scheduled at midnight. It's ridiculous. Health Counseling and Disability Services has said time and time again that the biggest barrier to serving the student body is space. It's not the availability of counselors, it's the availability of space for them to work in. And finally, the Office of the University Registrar is very much on board with our idea of reopening the Physical Education Center, the PEC, because they need space to schedule exams. So we've done the work to identify who are the partners in this project, and the AMS has an opportunity to emerge as a leader in bringing these partners together to the table to talk about having a long-term vision for the PEC. It can't just sit there as an empty building. As I said, the university does need space. And I think that a strong AMS executive can think big and long-term while working on advocacy and tangible initiatives. If you elect an AMS executive that settles for a platform that doesn't reach for big picture ideas that are also feasible, you'll get an AMS executive that doesn't have a long-term vision for the Queen's community. We have that long-term vision while also having the understanding of the day-to-day operations of the society to implement tangible initiatives that you would be able to see in the coming year. I would also encourage you to check out our website, votejdl.com. And we released a video that we're all very excited about. It's up there too. And finally, as I mentioned earlier tonight, we've been releasing fact sheets that are just quick one-page rundowns of more in-depth information about some of our bigger ideas. That's reopening the Physical Education Center. For all the first years watching, that was the old gym before you got here. Starting a blue light app, our ideas about library resources, including the app for library occupancy. Thank you.
display in the back about different AMS jobs and opportunities for next year. I'm sure that they would be delighted given how quickly Amanda is scurrying to the bat to answer any questions that you have. So let's give the teams a hand for an excellent job tonight.